The House will come to order. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 3426, an act relating to natural resources. The message is signed Thomas S. Boddard, Secretary of the Senate. Jordan moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 3426, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 4 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion, members. I ask for your support to go to conference to figure out some LCCMR stuff. Thanks.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. Messages from the Senate.
A message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 4252, an act relating to higher education. Walgamot moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to Senate File Number 4252, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 4 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
I recognize a member from Benton, Representative Wolgamont.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members. That is my motion, and I ask you to join me in supporting it so that we can go to conference and get some work done on the state grant program and on GO students and other issues facing Minnesota students in our higher education institutions. I ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those in favor of the I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also concur. We want to get to conference, and I urge a green vote.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. Message from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. I hereby announce the Senate refuses to concur in the House amendments to the following Senate file. Senate File Number 4612, an act relating to state government, modifying provisions related to the Department of Health and Human Services. The Senate respectfully requests that a conference committee be appointed. The Senate has appointed to such committee Senators Wicklund, Mann, Bolden, and Utke. The message is signed Thomas S. Boddard, Secretary of the Senate. Bierman moves that the House accede to the request of the Senate and that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 4 members of the House to meet with a like committee appointed by the Senate on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses on Senate File Number 4612.
Any discussion on the motion? I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is our motion, and appreciate it. Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate the following House file, herewith returned as amended by the Senate, in which amendments to concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File Number 3522, an act relating to veterans. The message is signed Thomas S. Boddard, Secretary of the Senate. Duran moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File Number 3522 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the member from Beltrami, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I move to concur with Senate amendments to the House File 3522.
Is there any further discussion? I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unlike other committees, thanks to Chair Bliss and Vice Chair Olson, this is a good bill. We concur. Vote green.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur with the Senate say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill a 3rd reading as amended by the Senate.
3rd reading, House File Number 3522.
Any further discussion? I recognize a member from Beltrami, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House File 3522 is my bill that allows the Department of Veterans Affairs to temporarily close the state veterans' homes under a CMS order. This bill was passed along with 5 other bills last week. The Senate packaged all the bills up into House File 3522 and passed the Senate 67-0. This bill includes the House File 3522, our House File 3919, which is Representative Cha's SGU bill. It also includes there it is. House File 4615, which is Vice Chair Olson's, that increased National Guards and state active duty pay. Also includes House File 3684, which is Chair Bliss's putting grant requirements into the MDVA process. And then also one more from Vice Chair Olson, House File 3532, which expands eligibility for burials in veteran cemeteries and National Guards and reserve members. Also to extends eligibility for honor guards for SGU veterans, National Guard and reserve members. Lastly, the bill includes House File 4492, which is Chair Bliss's bill that puts Commander's Task Force into statute. All these bills passed with no red votes, and I urge your support. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize a member from Washington, Representative Cha.
Thank you, Chair. We have spoken, Representative Duran and myself, and I concur. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Zhang.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't need to say anything, just vote green.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Coulter.
Go ahead. Coulter, yes.
Coulter votes aye. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley, aye.
Momani Hiltzley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 134 yeas and 0 nays, the bill is repassed and its title agreed to. Announcements by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announced the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 3426. Jordan, Fisher, Heinzman, and Burkle.
Another announcement by the Speaker.
Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announced the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 4252, Walgamot, Coulter, Robbins, and Rarig.
And another announcement by the Speaker.
Announced by the Speaker. The Speaker announced the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 4612, Bierman, Ryer, Backer, and Nadeau.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 3210. The Chief Clerk will announce the bill.
Senate File number 3210, an act relating to human rights, including disability accommodations as protection from discrimination.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand that there is continued conversation with the bill author and others to try to find an agreeable path forward on this bill, and I understand there's going to be a motion to table, and I would ask if Representative Disco would yield for a question.
He'll yield. Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My understanding is that Leader Stevenson and Speaker Demuth have agreed that this bill will be tabled and then will be brought up after the other bills on the calendar for today with a vote by 9 p.m. And I wanted to affirm that understanding.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Long, for the question. Yes, that is the agreement that's been made.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then I would urge our members to vote to table agree to Representative Niska's motion.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate File 3210 be laid on the table.
All those in favor of the motion to table the bill, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 4017. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4017, an act relating to solid waste, requiring study of unlawful shipments of infectious waste.
I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Washington, Representative Johnson W.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, this is a bill that was dubbed the grossest bill ever written, and those who have been in the committees are thankful that pictures and boards are not allowed on the House floor. This bill, House File 4017, is a study of unlawful shipment of infectious or pathological waste. This bill came about, as maybe you have seen in various news reports, is some very nasty stuff showing up at the recycling energy floor in Newport. Now, this is where this was happening, but upon working on this bill, I have found out this is happening statewide. What is happening is when in hospitals and in medical centers, which are getting to be more and more popular throughout the state, is they have bins. They have the regular garbage, then they have the hazardous, and then they have the medical waste. The medical waste is a red bin. And what's happening is the product that is showing up on these floors is not going in the red bin. And the product we're talking about is anywhere from, intestines, blood, vials, feet, skin, basically tubes, needles. This is all stuff that's showing up on the floor. And you can imagine if you go to work and all of a sudden you're just doing your job, you open up a bag and all of a sudden you see this stuff fall out. You don't know what you do. Do you just call 911 because you just came upon a possible crime scene? Or what do? And what's happening, and nobody blames them, is workers are saying, we can't work like this. This is putting us in danger. Figure about a needle, sharp objects, so they're walking off the floor. This is causing a huge problem, especially in a facility that goes 24 hours, 7 days a week, that can't shut down. All of a sudden, they're having to shut down, bring in basically hazmat, put it all together, and then try to do an investigation. That is causing a backup to all the haulers. That's also causing more cost to those who have garbage service. So what we decided to do, we need to take care of this. This was a law that was written originally in 1989, and for some reason, it's now not being followed. There are representatives that were getting regular texts from me saying, and because I was getting them, we just got another load. We just got another load. It was on the news. It was good for 2 days. We got another load. So what we've figured out in trying to figure out why this is happening, and this bill has been through various different versions, and it's gotten to a point that I believe people can agree on, and we've had a lot of support, bipartisan support. Thank you for everybody who signed on to it. It just shows how important this is to conduct a study. And basically what this bill does now is that by January 15th, the Commissioner of Public Pollution Control Agency must submit a study to the chairs, ranking minority members, and ranking minority members of the Senate and the House of Representatives committees in a version with primary jurisdiction above blah, 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 services law about who is producing this. An assessment of the extent of the frequency of unlawful transfer of infectious or pathological waste to solid waste management facilities, an assessment of the costs associated with those unlawful transfer. So basically what there's going to be, there's going to be a study. Why is this happening more? Why is it happening at all? Is it happening in the medical buildings? Is it happening at surgery centers, hospitals? Why is this happening? How big of an issue? How we deal with it? What we need to do to fix it? And then also including what the possible fines and answers there is for that. There is a $75,000 allocation that is coming appropriated from the environmental fund to the Commissioner of the Pollution Control Agency to address this. But we need to get a handle on this. People should not be going to work and then realizing that their health is in danger, both their mental health from running into this or actually getting stuck with a needle. There's a reason why we have medical waste go into a certain place and into a certain bin, into a certain place. The place where we send our trash in these facilities is not the place to handle it. So it's a worker safety issue, and that's what's part of this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I do have a technical amendment that goes along with this.
There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Johnson W. moves to amend House File number 4017, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A6.
I recognize a member from Washington, Representative Johnson W.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, this is basically a technical amendment, Amendment A6. What it was doing is it changed some wordage to put it where we intended it to be. It basically, one of the concerns was the haulers, which they don't know what they're hauling until it actually gets there. We're not the part of the study and being held accountable for something that they didn't, partake in. So what this does is it brings it back to holding it. Those who are generating it are the ones that are held responsible. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a good common sense amendment. I encourage people to vote green.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The Chief Clerk will give the bill its third reading.
House File number 4017, third reading as amended.
Third reading. I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage a green vote. This is a very good common sense bill as amended. Thank you.
Any further discussion to the bill? I recognize the author of the bill, the member from Washington, Representative Johnson W.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it's a great bill, bipartisan. Please vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The Chief Clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Coulter.
Go ahead.
Coulter, aye.
Coulter votes aye. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 yeas and 8 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 4138. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4138, an act relating to civil law, establishing requirements for social media platforms related to accounts for minors.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm wondering if we should take up the amendment, and I can explain what the amendment does first.
There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House File number 4138, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded A10.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, over the last few weeks, I've continued to take input from stakeholders and from many across the aisle. I want to especially thank Andy Smith, who's had great deal of input in this, Representative or Leader Stevenson, and also Representative Bonner on helping to make some changes that I think are making this bill better. And so I will go over some of the items in this A10. There's conformities to better match the Senate language. And those can be found on line 2.28, lines 3.1 to 3.2 and 315. And we added some transparency requirements. We added language mandating that social media platforms must include information on their website about the age estimation process so that users and parents know what the process is for determining an age of a user. And this is consistent with other transparency requirements for social media companies. And if you look up at our current statute at 325M.33, this is going to be added to that list for transparency purposes. The covered social media platform definition has changed slightly. It was based on $1 billion in ad revenue over the last one of the last 3 years, and we took out the word ad. We felt like a better measure was a total revenue of $1 billion. And then we added 10,000 as the threshold for account holders. And there has to be 10,000 account holders in this bill are defined as people that reside in this state. So it would require 10,000 account holders in the state of Minnesota. We modified the social media platform definition exemptions. And one of the things that we added there was that included in that definition of covered social media platforms would be any platform that has user-generated content. We also deleted the word retain when it comes to data collection. And Representative Bonner had a really a good idea, and that was to make the privacy settings at their most private. And so we are having that as a permanent part of the account for a child user. That, by the way, I learned through just listening to some podcasts and getting some more information. The privacy settings, a lot of times when those are loose, that's where the predators come in and make contact with our kids. And then we are adding language. We carried over the language on the data piece, on the where'd I go? The age verification from the parents. We carried that over to covering the verified or for the age estimation as well. So no data collected for the purpose of age estimation of a child at any time can be sold, transferred, or disclosed, except when needed to comply with law, other current law. And then the dispute process, we made it a little bit more neutral in that the process that can be used is one that the social media platform chooses. We felt like because technology is constantly changing, there may be better and better processes to determine age. So that is the amendment, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask for member support.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott. This has been a great bill to work on. I think this is a good example of committee work doing exactly what it should be. When this came to Commerce, I expressed some concerns and actually voted no on the bill, but we continued to work together, specifically on that data piece. I think all of us in here agree that big tech generally is collecting too much data on all of us, and especially on our children. And I was concerned that this bill would not put the state in a position of requiring data to be collected by these companies. And so we worked together to make sure the intent was clear, that we merely wanted them to take responsibility for the age of those users and making sure that they were in a correct designation. So I just want to read in the amendment, lines 3.5 through 3.7 is a really, really good thing that we have in this bill. Information collected on the account of a child by the social media platform shall not at any time be sold, transferred, or disclosed except to the extent necessary to comply with any other applicable state or federal law or regulation. That is a huge win for our children, for their data, for what they are doing online. And even when they grow, that data of what they were doing when they were a child is not able to be sold or otherwise used. So This is a great amendment. Thank you for the work. I would also ask members to vote yes.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Bonner moves to amend House File Number 4138 to third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A11.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you. So I'm going to be up front in that all of you on this floor know that for the last 4 to 6 years, I have spent copious amounts of my life focused on online safety for kids. As a technologist, I've looked at a lot of bills in order to do that and to figure out how we do that in a meaningful way. And more importantly, my goal has always been not about what looks good on a postcard or a flyer. That doesn't motivate me. I don't really care. I don't care about the credit. I don't care about what looks good. I care about protecting kids. And every day when I come to work, I think about the best way to do that. And I've spent 6 years, looking at options to do that. Many of you know that I am the author of the Minnesota Kids Code, the design code, that seeks to get at the heart of this issue. Not move the deck chairs around, not do the other things, but to really get to the root, the inherent design of this harm to children. In essence, we have a space that was never created for children. It was never designed for them. And what we have done is created a literal adult playground. And sure, there's a few fun pieces there. There's the cute puppy videos. In fact, my family has said that I should just get that long-haired cream dachshund that I really want after last June. But what it's also done is create an adult playground that is littered with pedophiles, sextortionists, human traffickers, drug dealers, folks dealing in self-harm. And I want to be clear about what we do with this bill today, regardless of whether it passes or it doesn't, that this bill does not address the underlying concern. It doesn't get to the root. It's a good start. And I can't rail against some of this bill because it came directly out of my bill in many respects, setting the highest level of privacy by defaults. Those are all really good, honorable things. That is a great part about this bill. And I want to give credit for that. I appreciate that we took an amendment that makes sure that we keep those highest level of privacy settings in place as long as that individual is under a child account. That's really important. I also appreciate that it goes after certain items on here that are addictive design features. But I want to keep in mind as we talk about this today that those are symptoms of the disease. They don't solve the underlying disease. We didn't clean up the playground. We might have made it a little harder to get to the kids on the playground or put a few more obstacles in the way with this bill. But the reason I'm saying that today is not to discourage people from voting for this bill, because there are some good things in it. And I want to thank Chair Scott for that. But I also want to make very clear today to everyone on this floor that this should be a first step and not the end. That before we go home to our districts and we pat ourselves on the back and tell ourselves that we actually cleaned up the playground, because we didn't, that there's next steps that have to happen in order to truly protect kids in the state of Minnesota. This is not enough. It is a good first step, but it is by no means the end. We'll talk in a minute about the A14 and the issues with that. I had actually hoped we would have taken that one first, but this specific one is talking about the age. The amendment does three things. It eliminates the definition of child. It enhances the definition of minor and ties it to Minnesota statute 645B. It's also in 609, by the way. But the reason, and it changes everywhere in the bill where it says child to minor. And there's a very specific reason to do that. So one, it sets a legal precedent that ties it to Minnesota state law, which makes it a little bit stronger in the courts. It also sets up the definition of minor. And when we talk about the arguments that will be made for this bill and why we'll be sued for this bill, the argument goes back to something called COSA, in which they set up this arbitrary date of the age of 13. And when I say arbitrary because it was based on nothing. The author of the original bill will tell you that it was a compromise. They didn't actually have any specific reason for choosing 13. There was no science or physiology or anything like that behind that number. And in fact, they have since regretted that decision. But what this does is change it to a minor. That means anyone under the age of 18. That means your 16-year-olds and your 17-year-olds would still have the highest level of privacy and protections by default. And when we talk about the differences between, say, a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, there is no evidence anywhere that there's some great divide between a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. There is no evidence that they are mentally, emotionally, physiologically, scientifically more advanced. But what there is a whole lot of legal precedent across the entire country that says that the age of 18 is the age of consent. In the state of Minnesota, there is bills, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me to give you the exact statute numbers, but we have made it clear that in the state of Minnesota, a child may not drink, they may not smoke, they may not get a body piercing, they may not get married, they can't gamble, they can't vote, they can't do any of those things because we believe in the state of Minnesota that cognitively, those children are not ready to do those things or make those adult decisions on their own. And if you look nationwide, you will find that generally speaking, there is a ton of precedent across the nation that the age of 18 is in fact the age of consent. Now we could argue that maybe that should even be a little higher, and in some cases in Minnesota, we have actually made it higher, right? We've pushed things to the age of 21. Because we now have a little bit better understanding of brain science and development and how kids appreciate and understand consequences. But more or less what this is about whether or not we want to monetize our children, whether we want to give them higher levels of data privacy and protections by default. And if you have a 17-year-old in this room, if you've had a 17-year-old, if you've been a 17-year-old, I think you can understand that there really is no good reason why we would not want to protect 16 and 17-year-olds. So there's that part of it. And then there is the legal argument, which is much, much stronger for making this the age of 18. And I know that they're going to tell you that we should advise against this today. But here's what I'm going to ask of each of you. I'm going to ask you to think about your 17-year-olds at home, your 16-year-olds. I'm going to ask you to think about if our goal here is really to protect kids and to do every single thing we can do to protect kids. I want you to dig down, I want you to think in your brains, and I want you to think in your hearts. And I want you to vote your conscience on whether or not we should go to the age of 18 to protect kids. I think if we can get to that place, we are off to a strong start. We can build upon this next year, but it also sends a strong message to the rest of the country who are debating this issue and who are too afraid to take the leap and say, we're not just going to go to 13. We're not going to stop at 15. We're not going to stop at 16 because our kids are not for sale. We should not be monetizing our children before they have reached the age of consent. Legally and morally, there is a good and compelling reason why we should dig into our hearts and accept the A11 today. I will encourage you all to do that soul searching as you think about it and vote green on the A11.
Further discussion. I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to request a roll call on this.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a
amendment.
roll call. Representative Scott.
Thank you. Representative Bonner, thank you for your input. Thank you for the back and forth conversation over Mother's Day weekend on this really important legislation. And members, one of the reasons for the under 16 age in this bill is that there have been First Amendment challenges where 16-year-olds have been found to have certain First Amendment rights. And because so many of the lawsuits brought by big tech over the years have been centered around the content and those First Amendment rights, we thought it better to start at age 16 or just under 16. That's the reason for the age that we chose here. And I do just want to reiterate that this is just a first step. This bill's effective date will not be until July of 2027, and there is time. But because some of the changes that Representative Bonner wanted were pretty big, like changing 16 to 18, and then her other amendment that we'll hear about in a little bit, were pretty substantial changes to the bill. I felt that it was maybe just a little bit too much to take on with 1 week left in session. But I do want to thank her for her input and what she's done over the years to protect our kids online, and we're trying to do some more of that here today. And just so folks know, too, that if children do have a child account on social media going forward, if this bill becomes law, it will look completely different. There won't be ads, and we can get into more of exactly what the bill will do and how that will look. But for now, members, I would encourage a no vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion. I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll echo a lot of what Representative Scott said. Representative Bonner does bring up a lot of very good discussion points that we should talk about. That said, I do believe that our law in many areas does treat 16 and 17-year-olds slightly differently. They do some pre-adult activities such as be able to drive, be able to be pre-registered. There's some banking law that changes around who can be the primary on a banking account. And I think the usage of a children's social media account, I think there is some good space in between that 16 and 17. We do have some good universal agreement on it. So members, I will say vote your consciences on this. I will be a no, but of course, as Representative Scott said, this is just the start of what we want to do in this space. So certainly more discussion to come.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott. I'll be voting no on this amendment, not because I don't see big tech and the issues that they've caused as something that's worthy of being prevented by somebody who's 18. But as I grew up and tech kind of was growing alongside me, I was able to recognize and distinguish that there are parts of it that are good and parts that are bad. At its best, it provides community, socialization, and access to information. But at its worst, it provides isolation, it provides depression, and overall, societal collapse is flourishing because of it, instead of human flourishing. But we have to allow for some of that growth and the understanding of the good and the bad of social media to be during the most formative years when you're not an adult, while you're in high school, while you're trying to figure out how tech should serve you instead of you serving it. And for those reasons, I'll be voting against this amendment, but I appreciate the author of the amendment's intent.
Any further discussion? I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Hennepin, Representative Bonner.
Thank you. I did want to speak briefly to that concept of the courts. I want to be very clear that this bill in its current form has not ever been vetted by the courts. It is the first of its kind. So I just want to be clear about that. On the age of 16, while there certainly is some conversations about that, I think if we look at the preponderance of the evidence and the preponderance of the precedent in state and federal law, the age of 18 is, in fact, the age of consent. And I want to underscore for folks as they're talking about this particular debate what I said earlier and why this is so important to have this fight. If we're going to have it, let's have it. Let's go to big tech and make that fight. And you know why? Because I want to remind people that we didn't clean up the playground. So when this switches over to an adult account, the pedophiles, the sextortionists, the child traffickers, the drug dealers, all the self-harm folks are still there. They're still lurking around the corners of that playground. So when you take off the training wheels, are you convinced that your 16 and 17-year-old is ready to handle that? Because I'm just going to guess, by some of the bills we've brought forward from other folks in this body, that if we're being honest with ourselves, the answer to that question is still no. And I want to also be clear about one last point. When we make that cutoff at 16, we're also talking about allowing things in a digital world that we would never, ever allow in a physical world. We would never allow our 17-year-old to go to the mall and hang out in the food court with pedophiles or drug traffickers or human traffickers for that matter. We would never, ever allow that. But what we're saying today is that if we don't raise this to 18, that it's okay to do that. And I think we all know in our hearts the answer to that question. Please vote your conscience.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Coulter.
Vote no? Go ahead.
Coulter, no.
Coulter votes no. Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, no.
Momani Hildsley votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 15 yeas and 111 nays, the amendment does not prevail. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Smith moves to amend House Law number 4138, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A13.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. So this bill is about holding social media to the same standard that I think all of us expect from our neighbors and our community. That if we see something or hear something about potential violence that would hurt some other person or Minnesotan, we expect we ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, would let law enforcement, other public safety apparatus know about that threat so it could be stopped before it ever happened. This amendment is trying to create a system where platforms like Meta, YouTube, will potentially see threats and report them to our MNFC, which is the Fusion Center, which is kind of like our area of understanding within the BCA. It's where we report things. It's how they get to the various public safety apparatuses across our state. I think this is a very, very good start. I would also want to yield the floor to Representative Myers, who may want to talk about this language. But members, that's what we're looking for. We want social media companies to say if they see something that is potentially dangerous for Minnesotans.
There's an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Myers moves to amend the Smith amendment to House Law number 4138, the third engrossment, as amended, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A17.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. You know, I do want to thank both Representative Scott and Representative Smith. We spent quite a bit of time this weekend you know, working on this. And I wanted to bring forward this amendment to the amendment just to tighten things up a little bit to make sure that we're really focusing on what we want to. And, you know, a lot of this is around community safety overall. So the amendment to the amendment inserts language that includes a social media platform must review publicly available user-generated content. It's also adding in a definition in regards to mass violence and also detailing that what the Fusion Center would cover or what this bill would cover would be taking place in Minnesota. And finally, it's also about changing some of the reporting. You know, some of the language in there, again, just to tighten it up, was, you know, promptly. I'm looking to make it a little bit tighter and to show more of an urgency. So some of the language includes immediate reporting. You know, this was drafted to ensure that we're proactively looking at ways to increase opportunities for our local law enforcement to be aware and to be proactive and also to investigate these threats of violence, and also to make sure that those social media companies are going to report it. Again, I want to thank Representative Smith and a lot of the other organizations that worked on this with me, and I would ask members to vote yes.
Discussion on the amendment to the amendment. I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank Reps Smith and Rep Myers for working on this and for keeping me informed along the way. And members, I'm not opposed to the concept or idea of this. I think it's good. But none of this language has had a single hearing in the House or the Senate. And that gives me great concern. And what I would rather see happen is that since we're going to have some time to work on this until next July, I would really rather see this discussion, full hearings in the legislature happen next legislative session. So I would ask for a roll call on the Myers amendment and ask members to vote no. Thank you.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Further discussion to the amendment to the amendment. I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Representative Scott. I would, thank you, Speaker. I will just say I do think that this is part of a larger discussion that will continue to go, but I think the language that we've worked out with the BCA is strong here, and I think we want our social media company to be good neighbors, and they are currently flagging for their own communities when there is mentions of violence, and so why wouldn't we want that to carry over into the real world? So, members, I'm going to encourage a yes vote on this.
Any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment to the amendment, the representative from Hennepin, Representative Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Scott, the enactment date gives us a lot of time. And because of that, this is an opportunity for this body to do something that I think a lot of us agree with. And we can actually have an impact on community safety, school safety, within places of worship. I would ask members to support this because this moves us in the right direction. This shows that we're listening, that we're trying to find additional options. No one solution is going to fix a lot of the stuff that we do down here, and this is just another option. So I'd ask members to vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the Chief Clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Coulter. Coulter votes aye. Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 83 yeas and 47 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. There is an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Greenman moves to amend the Smith Amendment, the House File Number 4138, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A18.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this amendment reflects, I think, where Representative Myers was going, which is the need to take action to prevent, intervene, and reduce harms of mass violence. And there is no more dangerous mass violence than mass shootings that are committed with weapons of war. We cannot have this and say we are doing anything without a focus on those weapons that make these acts more deadly, more terrifying, and that have created a uniquely American problem of mass shootings. One that demands what I think Representative Myers says, which is no one solution will fix it, which this will not either. But we do actually have a bill that focuses on prevention, intervention, and harm reduction at the desk. And so as we think about what we should be doing here, telling social media companies to identify articulatable threats, we should make sure that they're focusing on the guns that are creating the most harm, that both experts and the research show, these military-style assault weapons. Why? Because we know that they were manufactured and created to do that, to create more casualties quicker for the battlefield, yet they are still in use in our communities. 9 of 10 of the most deadly shootings were committed with military-style assault weapons. And these weapons that have been delivered, that have been created to deliver that kind of casualties, that kind of impact, again, are still on our streets day after day. Well, we have a bill, a comprehensive gun violence prevention bill that we know the Senate sent over 8 days ago, that is just sitting there being blocked by Speaker Demuth. So this amendment obviously, as Representative Myers said, is one very, very small piece. The actions we could be taking, the actions that 70% of Minnesotans want us to take, would not be cherry-picked solutions that the gun lobby doesn't oppose, but would be keeping weapons off the street, investing in mental health, intervention and prevention, protecting schools and safe spaces, looking at firearms on campus. All of these things, we have a bill sitting in some drawer at the Speaker's desk. Thank you, Representative Olson, for looking for it. And that may sound funny, but there are families in my community, I know there are families in your community who are asking us to act and not to cherry pick one little solution, but asking us to do it all. Because we know that the epidemic of gun violence in America, we know that it is, whether it's in our schools, in our places of worship, on our streets, in our grocery stores, in our concerts and halls, we know that in order to do that, we actually have to look at and talk about the weapons designed for war that make this uniquely American problem a problem. So what I would ask is members should absolutely support this bill. If you say that you care about community safety, school safety, if you are listening, you cannot do that without talking about the weapons of war. That's what you hear. If you were, any of you, I don't think any of you were there, but some of us were down with doctors from and healthcare providers from Children's Hospital and others talking about the impact that these weapons have on kids, on their bodies. And one of the things they tell us is they cause more deaths and more harm and more injuries. So members, this is an easy yes vote, but it's sort of beside the point, isn't it? What we need is Speaker Demuth to put the bill, the comprehensive gun violence prevention strategy that includes prevention, intervention, and yes, deals with these weapons that were made for war and the impact they're having on our communities on the floor so that the public knows where we stand. Everyone can vote how they want to vote, but you should go tell your kids, tell the communities in my family, the families in my community and yours, where you stand on actually taking research-based, community-driven response to banning and preventing these weapons from hurting our communities. And I'd ask for a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Thank you, Representative Greenman, for your amendment. And thank you, Representative Scott, for your bill. Is that right? It's not your bill, it's your bill. I do get confused sometimes when we're sitting here for a while. I appreciate this bill. I think it's a pretty good bill. I think most of it is pretty good. And I think that the amendment that we're amending onto the amendment would make the bill a lot better. I think there's some really good work being done here. And when I think about how we want to go forward protecting people from the addictive harms of social media and the consequences of those addictions, this is the kind of thing that we should be thinking about. So just quickly, social media companies are selling addiction to people who use their product. That is the purpose of social media companies, is to make as many addicts as possible. And they know that, and they know the hammer's coming, and we all kind of understand how that works, and we should try to protect young people from harmful addictive products like we do all the time in this body. This bill, the overarching bill, is doing good work to address some of those addictive features. And we wouldn't call them addictive features if the product itself wasn't an addictive product. But the real purpose behind trying to avoid these addictive features and having our young people addicted to their social media is the outcomes that come as a result of that, right? We don't ban minors from smoking cigarettes because smoking cigarettes is bad. We ban it because it causes cancer, right? We ban it for the outcome we are trying to have our young people avoid. Smoking is bad. Cancer is the result of it. social media is bad, but what's the result we're actually trying to avoid? When we say young people shouldn't be on these addictive social media apps, why? To what end? To what end other than we don't want them wasting their time, which is, you know, a good one. I've got kids. But at the end of the day, the addiction causes an outcome that we know we do not want them to participate in. And one of the things that social media addiction is leading to is violence. And we know that that is true. Yesterday, actually, in one of, you'll have to forgive me, Representative Schultz, I don't remember which one of your amendments from yesterday. You said this, but you did say at one point, we, the body, should always root ourselves in the data. And I have your little quote right here, because I was like, I agree with Rep. Schultz. So we should root ourselves in the data. Representative Griedman told us what the data was. We know what the data is when it comes to violence, and we know, based on the data, what to do about that violence. And it is take meaningful action to restrict access to firearms that are leading to the deaths of our loved ones. Adults and children, everyone. This is the gun violence epidemic affects everyone. It has affected everyone in this room. It has affected some of us very close to home. It has infected entire communities that have been waiting for attention and restitution. So I just want us to make sure we're thinking about, as we go forward working on social media, and this is something that I care very much about. This is a subject, AI, social media, the technology that we're using, and the way it's reshaping what it means to be a person, the way it's reshaping what it means for humanity to interact with each other and with our own self-reflection. That's extremely important to me. And we have to do that work with an understanding of what outcomes we're trying to build. We are trying to build a better and safer and more vibrant future for everyone, for all of our communities. We're not just doing it for the sake of it. We're doing it to avoid the outcomes that are in this amendment to the amendment. So I appreciate the amendment. I appreciate the bill. And I urge us to continue thinking what the point of this is. What's the point? The point is to protect people. The point is to help people live and to stop watching our young people killed by these weapons. We've said it a million times over here, but the #1 cause of death of our youth is gun violence. I don't know how any of us can sleep at night, knowing that that is true and knowing that we refuse to take action to make those guns a little harder to come by. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I too rise in support of the Greenman Amendment and want us to keep in mind as we are thinking about the various impacts on young people from social media and keeping them safe, that as the amendment acknowledges, we have an epidemic in our country that's different than other countries. There's social media all around the world, the same impact on kids all around the world. The difference is the guns. That's what's different in our society. That's what causes us to lose young people of all ages. A reminder that guns are the leading cause of death for kids in our country. That is not the case in other countries. We do not need to accept that. And so, members, I really would urge us to please, 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 as we're thinking about these different actions that we can take and talk about how we're trying to protect young people, we're not going to do that without changing the conditions within which they live when it comes to the guns. There is right now a bill at the desk that was approved by a majority of the Senate that takes a comprehensive approach. It addresses those weapons of war, those assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, but it takes other steps as well. Let's have a discussion about that proposal that advanced out of the other body. Let's have that bill not be held back, not be hidden in some location, wherever it is, but be a bill that we can discuss and debate. Because this is a good step forward, advancing this amendment, the amendment to the amendment, advancing the underlying amendment, and the bill as well. And members, as we're trying to keep kids safe, let's address the factor that is making them so unsafe compared to any place else we'd ever want to compare ourselves in the world, and address the guns. So thank you, Representative Greenman, for your work, and thank you for this amendment. And members, I would urge a green vote on the amendment. And please, let's all together call for that Senate bill to be heard in our body. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
I think I will say more a little later, Speaker, if that's okay, if we can come back to me later.
I would love to come back to you later. I recognize a member from Carver, Representative Ream.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I, too, rise in support of Representative Greenman's A18 amendment. I am one of the authors of one of the anonymous threat reporting system bills that we've been talking about in the House here. And in the course of doing research for anonymous threat reporting systems, I met with the BCA. They told me about the School Safety Center. They told me about the app called See Something, Say Something. And I think it's really great that it's in this bill, because so many schools, so many teachers do not know about this amazing resource. So I think it's really good that we're looking into how we can have these awful mass shootings prevented. And one way to do that is for us to monitor what's happening on social media and have people, kids included, students included, have a way for them to communicate that to the authorities so that we can prevent these awful, horrific acts from happening. We know that many of the students involved in these school shootings are insiders, which means they're either current students or they're former students, so they know the building, which means hardening our schools doesn't necessarily prevent these shootings. And we need a way for our kids to communicate when they see something on social media. We need a way to get that reported. So I think it's great that we have the School Safety Center, they have the app. I encourage everyone to take a look at it. The other thing I wanted to point out, a couple things under the threat assessment factors. Number 5, speech communicating desperation of despair that clearly indicates a potential for harm to self or others, or a warning to others of an impending harm to self or others. This is really important. We have the 988 line, which has now been proven to have saved lives. It's been very effective. We need more of that. Number 8, whether the threat includes a reference to or a picture or video of a semi-automatic military-style assault weapon as defined in section 624.712, subdivision 7. Very important. I've heard a lot of these school shootings, these kids, they show their arsenal. They have it online for people to see. So this needs to be reported. And then number 9, whether the threat is directed at a class of persons protected under the Minnesota Human Rights Act. I think this is a great amendment. I think it really needs to be added to the bill. The threats are coming from these kids who are posting online. If we can stop it before these kids get to the school, before damage is done, we would save a lot of heartbreak. And other people have mentioned this, but we do have a bill, somewhere maybe hidden in a desk somewhere, I've heard, that does include these reporting systems. It does include an anonymous reporting system in the bill. So I'd love to see that come up for a vote. I think we all deserve to be able to talk about that, to address the horrific rise in shootings we're seeing. Lastly, I just want to say, someone here has mentioned that we need to work on things that we all can agree on. Well, I will tell you, in my suburban district, 79% of the people in my area want to see a ban on assault weapons. They want to see a limit on these high-capacity magazines. They want a ban on ghost guns. They want a ban on these binary triggers. Maybe we all don't agree, but I would say the majority of Minnesotans agree that this is something we need to do. So once again, I support this amendment, but I also support that we have a much bigger, more robust, honest debate about what we can do to prevent these school shootings and these acts of violence. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. I also want to rise and support the agreement amendment. I think the conversation that we're having today is a really important conversation. And second, I also want to thank Representative Greenman for the work that she's been doing. I think I will be maybe the fourth person to also remind the body that guns remain the leading cause of death for children and teens in the United States. And this is something that we should be ashamed of as something that we call ourselves, a developed country, right? No other OECD country has this distinction. And for me, that's really important because the other part of this, right, is that today we're talking about what people have called weapons of war on our street. But there is no war in the United States. And I know this because of my family's unique experience with war. My parents, my grandparents fled a war-torn country. In countries that are affected by conflict, right, the leading cause of death for children is either starvation or guns. And so for my grandparents and my family, they had no choice but to flee their country. For us here in the United States, where there is no active conflict, right, we have a choice to protect our children. It is not to flee, it's to vote to pass the bill, Senate File 4067, that the Senate has already passed, right? So it's been about a week since
Speaker,
it was
point of
reported.
parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the order of business that we're on?
We're currently on discussion of the amendment to the amendment, the A18 amendment to the amendment. Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Leader Niska. Good reminder for everyone, right? There is a bill that we could pass which would protect children, just like the bill that we're passing today, hopefully, right? And I want to make sure folks understand that, because apparently people don't want us to talk about that. We heard in the Education and Finance Committee that the way that we can approach protecting children from gun violence should be a public health approach, right? Where you're kind of like thinking about cheese and thinking about the ways to attack this issue from various angles and various holes, because not one solution can solve everything. And so I just want to remind the body of that, and also want to let folks know we have many options to protect children, and I hope that we will take them. Thanks.
I recognize a member from Douglas, Representative Franzen.
Members, as we talk about the leading cause of death among children, I want to remind the body it is not gun violence, it is abortion. Abortion kills over 1 million children a year in this country. And if we really want to do something about childhood deaths, we would look at abortion and put an end to that. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate folks coming forward with an amendment. And I'm going to ask for a no vote on this amendment. This definitely would be one that would need to be vetted through the committee process. And so for that reason, please vote no.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Sencer-Murra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Greenman, for this amendment. I'm in support of it. I would love to kind of understand, though, how this compares to the amendment that we just looked at from Representative Myers, and I'm wondering if Representative Myers would yield to a question.
I'm sorry, Representative Sencer-Murra, I was not listening. Would you please repeat your request?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Myers would yield to a question.
Representative Myers is not here, so I don't believe he can do that. Sencer-Murra.
Well, it's really unfortunate that we're having a debate about an amendment that was so similar to the amendment that he has, but this amendment is not afraid to use the words mass shooting. So I was really hoping that I could ask Representative Myers why he chose the words mass violence event without mentioning shooting or guns specifically. It's really unfortunate that the person who brought this amendment and cares so deeply about the bill is not on the floor at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you for this amendment, Representative Greenman. We have said it a lot, but it bears saying again and again and again. The #1 cause of death of children is gun violence. The #1 cause of death is gun violence. The #1 cause of death in children is gun violence. We should agree that we want to stop gun violence for children. And we know how to do it. Many of the ways we know from studies is to ban assault weapons, ban high-capacity magazines of the weapons that are talked about in this amendment. Studies show that from 2015 to 2022, mass shootings with 4 or more people killed where an assault weapon was used resulted in nearly 6 times more people being shot, more than twice as many people killed, and 23 times as many people wounded as compared with the average. There's a bill right over there that we could vote on, send to the governor, he would sign it, that would make it harder to get those weapons in our state. Why aren't we doing this? I appreciate this amendment and the underlying logic of the amendment that we need to stop mass shootings in our state and in our country. And if we want to stop that, we need to stop the weapons of war that are being used in those scenarios. Members, I urge a green vote on this as one very small step, and hopefully we'll be able to hear an even larger step when we hear that Senate file later this week.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Katiza-Watun.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few days ago, in one of our districts, there was a teenager whose cell phone privileges were taken away. And because his parents took his cell phone privileges away, he shot them. And I think that this conversation speaks to the delicate balance and connection between cell phone and social media addiction, because somebody doesn't freak out that their cell phone is taken away because they don't have calling privileges, right? Like, I grew up with a rotary phone. There wasn't as much cool stuff that we could do on a rotary phone. So if we lost our calling privileges and I couldn't call my boyfriend, who lived long distance, by the way, that was a whole other story we don't have to get into today. But I just lived with it, right? Maybe I wrote him a note to pass him in school the next day, because smartphones weren't a thing, and apps weren't a thing, and social media was not a thing. And so this child, and thank you, Representative Bonner, for trying to make sure that all children have the same protections in this bill that the younger ones do, particularly. But he did not get in his car and run over his parents. He did not take a knife and stab his parents. He didn't fashion some sort of bomb and blow up his family's home. No. He got access to a gun and shot his parents and an innocent bystander, by the way, because he is so addicted to his telephone and social media and has access to guns. Representative Greenman, I appreciate you bringing this amendment forward. It is critical that we do not try to separate the dangers of social media and people having access to weapons of war. I urge members to vote yes, and I urge Speaker Demuth to bring that bill out of hiding so that we can take a real vote on it and protect our kids. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? I recognize the author of the amendment to the amendment, the member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Speaker, and I actually agree with Representative Scott on the Myers language. It hasn't gotten a single hearing. It hasn't been through committee process. It hasn't had members amend it, and neither has this. But this body just put that language onto your bill to pass off the House floor without a hearing, without any committee work, without any engagement. And yet we have a bill that's passed the Senate off the floor with a majority vote, which includes provisions that have been in every committee in this body: strengthening red flag laws, mental health intervention, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, banning binary triggers, banning ghost guns, anonymous threat reporting, which you heard about. We have a bill that did actually have all that work done. And yet, Republican leadership is saying the reason it's holding it hostage and not even reporting it, it's telling the media it's because of procedure. So that doesn't seem quite right. I think we all can use our ears and see with our eyes. It's probably because, like Myers' amendment, which he wasn't on the floor to tell us, it involves the word guns. It includes guns. And I know, get those emails too, that the gun lobby and the gun industry, who make so much money off of putting these guns in our communities, and then use a lot of that money to create the political support to keep them there, at the expense of the 70% of Minnesotans who are asking us, begging us, pleading with us to do something. And so that bill, the Senate bill, Senate File 4067, in case, Speaker, you might find it in a drawer, that hasn't yet been reported, that is being blocked, that the majority of Minnesotans are asking us to vote on. That bill has had the work done, and it is really unfortunate, because I am not sure what the members of this body and the members of this body who are represented by Speaker Demuth are afraid of voting on this comprehensive package that includes intervention, prevention, and harm reduction. And yes, in order to intervene and prevent, you have to talk about the weapons that are creating this uniquely American crisis. So members, I would ask that you vote yes on this bill, but I would also ask that you think about the words that are being used: being proactive, getting a handle on community safety. No one solution will fix the problem. And so yes, this small, very small provision will not fix the problem, but we do have a bill at the desk ready to be reported that people should take a position on, that will take a whole and big comprehensive approach to this epidemic of gun violence and mass shootings that we and our communities are experiencing, and we should vote on that. Members, vote yes and push for this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Momani Hildsley.
Momani Hildsley, aye.
Momani Hildsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. What? There being 67 yeas and 66 nays, the amendment to the amendment prevails. DePal changed his... Members, now to the underlying amendment as amended. Discussion. I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Olmsted, Representative Smith.
This amendment looks different than I was expecting, but it's a pretty good amendment. I would ask folks to vote green on this amendment to make sure that if there are potential mass shootings that are posted about on social media, that our public safety apparatus will know about it and can stop it. I certainly want to vote against that.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Momani Hiltsley.
Momani Hiltsley, aye.
Momani Hiltsley votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. I can't. I just closed it.
He just won't do it. He says a quick, yeah, I don't have it either.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Niska changes from no to yes.
Niska changes his vote from no to yes.
Niska changes from no to aye.
Mr. Speaker, point of order. Mr. Speaker, you had closed the roll.
There being 68 yeas and 66 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted.
Mr. Speaker, I move a recess to the call of the Speaker.
Representative Niska moves a recess to the call of the Speaker. All those in favor
Roll
say
call,
aye.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a roll call.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker,
I
ask for a roll call.
Roll call.
We have 15
hands for a roll call.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a roll call.